Socialist malarkey, what I'm going to do. I'm going to teach just for teaching's sake and learn just for learning's sake. He says it's like a radical idea and wishes me luck. Okay, well, that first joke didn't go so well, so you got to come out with a big one, you got to come out with a good one that really, grabs them, and then you got to end on a high note, and as soon as you hit that high note, even if you have more to say, hit it, and all right, I'm out of here. Thank you, good night, everybody. Tip your waitresses. God bless you. Gotta walk out on that one. I'm holding this thing, and now he's right up here. Okay. So I've already missed the mark on the first one. Let me get a new pen here. Well, I've been rooting around in my notes. I decided I'm going to talk first, and we'll see how long it takes, about a much discussed, much maligned character, a guy named Karl Marx. And well, he's all in the 19th century, 1818 to 1893, is that right? Oh, 83, sorry. And so, yeah, he lives completely in this time. And I'm just going to give you probably today some background on him so you know a little bit about him personally. I know you've all wanted to know him personally. And I set up my Germany map over here just for this exact reason. Let me try different pieces. And I set up my Germany map just for this purpose. All right. He's from an area here far west in Germany, what's today Germany. I circled it here for you. Trier, no, it's not a small town, but not a big town either. Very close to what's today Luxembourg, but very close to France also. And in the Rhineland area here on the Mosel River, very famous wine growing region here, off of the Rhine. And anyway, kind of a sleepy town, a Roman, the town's there because it was a Roman outpost. So it's a very old town dating back to that era, but the town though would have been a rather, and because it's close to the border, his dad had a certain job in that area. We'll get that in a minute. His family was not a working class family. I think a lot of people just assume that he comes from some kind of a background where he's seen, his parents slaving away in a factory somewhere and being exploited by the filthy capitalist pigs that own the. No, he lives in what would be considered a very comfortable middle class family, with some privilege even, and he grows up. That his father's an attorney, and he works for the Court of Appeals in Trier. They were Jewish, his family, and they, I'm not sure how observant they were as Jews, but they were, ethnically at least Jewish. In their family, I'm talking about this immediate family here, Marx and his parents, but in their family lineage and years before, generations before, the families had produced a rabbi for several generations in a row. So maybe there was some hope that maybe Karl would become a rabbi, I don't know, or one of his brothers, but they did not end up, none of them ended up becoming a rabbi. So at least there was some more orthodoxy in their faith in previous generations. The city, as I showed you, is close to the French border, and that area of Germany, going all the way to the end of World War II and going way back before Marx's time, had gone back and forth in many of these Franco-Prussian wars, France and Prussia, which is, I say Prussia, I'm talking basically about West Germany, And so the area he lived in would go back and forth between being, ruled over by the French and then over by the Prussians and go back and forth because it is close to the border. And so his father, having this job with the Court of Appeals, of course, that means his employer would change every time this would happen, that they would kind of go on this way. He's born in 1818, and in 1814, a few years before he's born, the Prussians took this area back over. So he's born into Germany or Prussia when he is a few years after this time. So 1814 is when the Prussians take this area back over, and they put into place a set of laws that they had come up with since the time that the area had been Prussian rule before, and these were anti-Jewish laws. So 1814, anti-Jewish laws. So almost, pretty close to 100 years, a century before Hitler makes any kind of splash on the scene as a soldier in World War I. You have Prussia already with these anti-Jewish laws. Anti-Jewish laws that existed in other places in Europe, other places within Prussia. There were other places, other areas of the law where there was a bias against Jews. This was one that's going to affect them, as has to do with government jobs and all that. But there's a really good book, although it would be a Herculean effort to read the whole book. It's a better reference, but maybe it's called Hitler's Willing Executioners, written by Professor Daniel Goldhagen, and it is a fascinating book about the history of anti-Semitism in Germany leading up to World War II, and it just shows you how over centuries, how the ground was made fertile for an anti-Semitic leader to come to power and rule over and be able to use this anti-Jewish sentiment and this kind of hatred of the Jews in order to kind of consolidate power. So that would be, if you're interested in, I don't know if you're interested in Nazism, but if you're interested in that historical aspect and almost sociological aspect of what happens over centuries of anti-Semitism, but he gets into the real details, like of how people, like jokes that were told or little figures of speech that were used that were anti-Jewish, which were anti-Semitic, and how over time that desensitizes people to the humanity of other people, of the Jews in this case. It reminds me very much of in the South with African Americans, and how over a few centuries, so not even as much time as the Germans had to get this going, how there was this dehumanization then and especially in the South, but other places, not just in the South, this, even in the use of language, and that's really insidious when it gets inside the language of the culture, where it's an everyday thing to use slurs or figures of speech and people almost become unaware of the fact that they're using my mother, I told you before, is from Louisiana, and sometimes she says things and I have to say, no, we don't say that anymore, and I don't mean, but I think there are things that maybe a lot of people wouldn't catch. And they're not blatantly obvious things, but there's some, I don't want to get into it, but she sometimes still says to me, Mom, that's not good. You can't. Oh yeah, okay. But it's part of her upbringing. It's hard to filter that out over, she's 70-something years old now. So, okay, so this is a long since been a problem in Germany before Hitler comes along. Hitler just took what was already there, and he had his own issues, and he also exploited it for his own political purposes. Okay, but the law here that as Prussia re-annexes and his father Heinrich, by the way, is working for the Court of Appeals, the law is that no Jewish person can hold a government job. No Jews working for the government. And of course, I guess he could. This is what tells me maybe that they weren't as observant or maybe nearly as orthodox as generations before. Is that because he could have just quit and said, well, okay, I'll go get a regular job, or I'll go become a lawyer, a private lawyer, and just help people. But he doesn't do that, though. They have a interesting out here, I guess, is that they convert and become Christian. They become Lutheran. Yeah. At least on paper. At least they can show documentation from the church that, oh, no, we're Christians now. We gave that up. We're not doing that anymore. We're Lutherans. And, okay, that's one way to get around it. Now, who knows if they kept on living with any kind of traditions or rituals or being observant of holidays like that. But at least on paper, this got around, this circumvented the Prussian law. And I wouldn't imagine it was that, I don't know how common that was to do that back then. What was I going to say about that? Oh, this kind of method, though, wouldn't have worked under the Jewish law, the Nuremberg laws that were passed in Germany, in Nazi Germany, because those laws weren't just about what was your religion, but they were about your blood. They were about your genealogy, your history. And so it didn't matter if you just converted on paper or even had a true conversion of heart and you became a Christian. It didn't matter. What mattered was that you were still Jewish by blood, and that's all that mattered. So this wouldn't have saved you in Nazi Germany, but in Prussia, it let him keep his job. And so, in fact, they had all their kids baptized, and even Karl was baptized after he was born. And so that's one way they got around this. I'm going to jump ahead then a little bit to Marx's, he turned 17 and he goes off to college and he goes to the University of Bonn. If you know, if that name sounds familiar to you, Bonn was served as the capital of West Germany when Germany was divided. They moved the capital of West Germany, it was East and West Germany, to Bonn. So Bonn was a sleepy little town, a college town on the Rhine River, and a lot of retirement communities there and things like that. All of a sudden, all the hustle and bustle of a major first world capital moves into that little city. And they were there from the 60s until I think they left 2000, in the early 2000s, 2003, 2002. So they were there for quite some time. All the embassies had to move back to Berlin, were there. And anyways, big mess. But Bonn, though, is not too far from home. So here's Trier on the map. And then Bonn is up the river, okay, up here. And here's the Rhine flowing right through it. And Bonn is here. And he goes there. Well, so just a little bit up the road. And he does, he enrolls as a law student there. He's going to be a lawyer like his father. And he does what none of you are going to do next year, right? He does what none of you are going to engage in next year. He gets involved in basically what I call a fraternity, the closest equivalent to a fraternity. He drinks a lot. He very social. He doesn't go to class very much. And the fraternity he gets in is known as there were several of these, they don't do this anymore, although they still have the fraternities, they don't do this part anymore. They were called dueling fraternities. And they would challenge each other to a duel with saber swords, not with like these fencing things with a orange tip on the end where you can't hurt anybody, but real swords, real sabers. And there are only like a couple of rules, like you can't jab, you can't lunge into somebody like to impale them with the sword. You can only slash at them. You can cut them open, but you can't like run them through with the sword. That was basically one of the rules, maybe one of the few rules. And of course, these fraternities like drank a lot, and this is a bad mixture, kids, of mixing toxic masculinity with alcohol and swords. This is going to always end badly. And people did die in these things sometimes, but more often than not, it was scars. And it was a bit of a badge of honor if you had a scar on your face or somewhere slashed you, like in the saber battles. And in fact, Marx had a scar on his face from this exact same thing. So apparently he was pretty good with the sword, or decent with it, and enough that his fraternity would put him up, or maybe he was just stupid enough to do it, I don't know, or drunk enough, who knows. He did all this, and again, didn't go to class, drank a lot, and dueled with swords. Okay, so he fails out of the University of Bonn. My first semester at Oklahoma State, I lived in the dormitory, and when we came back from Christmas break for second semester, the dormitory was a lot more empty than it was back in September. It's like, where's everybody? Where's Ned? Oh, he failed out, man. He's back at home. His dad said, no way, come back to the farm. Literally, he had to go back to the farm. So, yeah, you'll have this experience, I'm sure, next year. Two people are like, that's not going well. You need to come home for a while. So his dad said, hey, come on home. You're not going to waste your time there in Bonn and fail out. And so he said, you can come here and go to TCC, Trier Community College. There's not that, but I thought that was kind of weird. Kind of funny. He comes back to Trier where he just takes a semester off. He has a longtime girlfriend who ends up marrying eventually and stays married too. Anyway, after goofing off for the semester. And his girlfriend's father was a baron, so he married into a nice family. So they had some money, and anyway, that of course allows people to become intellectual if they choose to. The father, his future father-in-law was in fact an intellectual, and he saw promise in this young man, and maybe wanted him to succeed since he thought maybe that his daughter was going to marry this guy. And so on this semester off, he introduces him to to the writings of Homer and even Shakespeare and some other political writers, and also to a writer by the name of Saint Simon. Is his last name, but I can't remember if there's an E on the end or not. I think there is. Right, Saint Simon. And this is yeah, I mean, today they talk about Saint Simon, say he's a socialist, but maybe not socialist like we think about it today, but he had this idea of kind of utopian idea of making these, I'm going to talk about the Republic again, making these societies where they would be completely, I mean, literally gathering people together to live in community and to be self-sufficient, to be completely autonomous in the outside world. So in order to do that, he'd come up with all these ideas for what we'll need to remain autonomous, or to become autonomous and remain autonomous and self-sufficient. And so I want to say there were like 900 something jobs that will have to be done. So you got to have a certain number of farmers, a certain number of teachers, a certain number of, you got to have a shoemaker, you got to have a watch maker, I don't know, you got to have all this stuff that keeps a, clothes maker, textile work, whatever, who can keep this society, afloat, where they don't have to reach out outside the community. And it was, it's an interesting idea of what does it take to kind of just maintain the basics of an economy and of I guess you'd say, or a socioeconomic system. But the thing with this particular idea was that there would be no money involved. You wouldn't have any need for money anymore. So, and how that would work is this, basically, that everyone's doing their job. Like everyone has an assignment in this community. Yours is to be a farmer, and mine is to be a teacher, and Robbie's a cobbler, shoemaker, right? And Kara, is Kara, what do you want to do? You're an attorney, okay? Right? And Zach here is a professional bowler, okay? So, no, Zach here makes bowling balls. So this is one of the entertainment things we have to do. So, yeah, these are all important things, right? And so, Shay, you make watches, you make clocks and watches and you repair them and all. So I need a new watch or a new, timepiece of some sort. So I come to Shay and I say, yeah, I'm kind of due for a new timepiece. And okay, well, here's what I got. Here's what I got available, and I just pick one out and I take it. Yeah. Why? Because I'm teaching your kids. Yeah. That's right. It's an exchange. I do my part. I do my job. You do your job. I go to the grocery store. All this food, or the market, all this food came from the farmers that are working. I'm teaching their kids also. Yeah. I do my part. They're doing their part. Their kids get educated. I get food to eat. Right? If they need a watch, they can go get one also. If they need shoes, they can go talk to Robbie about it. Right? Look at these shoes. They're worn through. Can you repair these or get a new? Oh, get a new pair. Make a new pair. All right. So there you go. And then when he goes to the market, he gets gets food because he makes them shoes. It sounds great, right? It sounds like this kind of a very, I don't know. I wouldn't want to live like that, but it's puts a lot of pressure on everybody to really work hard and stuff. That might be part of the point. Okay. Some of these, now, different than the Republic, this idea was actually attempted, and even attempted here in the United States in a few cases. And then there were kind of groups that tweaked this a little bit, this idea, and even applied it to religious type, especially in Christian communities, to live this way, not just in a small sense, like the monastery, we could say live this way in a certain way, even the monastery here. Because they have a little bit of spending money they get, but they live in community and share things in common. Okay, that works. People have chosen to live there and it's small. But when you're talking about putting together, 900 people plus their children, and then you got a lot of people maybe who didn't really opt into this thing willingly as children come along. But they tried this in different, and a lot of them did have kind of a Christian thing. And if you read, the book of Acts, there's certainly some basis for this type of living. The way the early church, they don't really talk about that very much. I don't know why. The socialistic aspects of this whole early church thing about that people brought their money and their goods and what they could do to the table, to the altar, and they all shared among each other, everyone according to their need, each according to their ability. It sounds really Marxist, doesn't it? So, but all right, that might be an ideal, but that's a tough one to live up to. More senior thesis topics. I see. I feel them coming on. Okay, well, his father gets him interested in this idea. He gets a little more serious about things. He ends up going back to college the next semester after the semester he takes off. And he goes to the place where nobody ever parties or does anything wrong or drinks or duels each other or shoots each other or swords. He goes to the University of Berlin, which would have been a pretty decadent place probably at the time. But he's focused now, he's serious. What's weird is that he went there, and when today, if you go to the main building on the campus, University of Berlin, the original building, I guess they call it, the main building. As soon as you walk in, there's a huge marble slab with a quote from Marx on it. I don't know if you knew that was ever going to happen. He was just a young guy, just like 18, 19, showing up there. Yes, let me see here. And got involved in this. Okay, and he goes back to studying law. This is something I want to tell you real quickly that's different about, I can't speak for other university systems in Europe, but in Germany, though, if you want to study law, you want to become a lawyer, you don't go get an undergraduate degree, and you don't take classes like Biology 101 and psychology, and there's not like these core requirements, like you have to take all these classes. You actually already took all these classes in high school, and you got to get some more foreign language hours. No, if you want to go study law, your first year at college, you're studying the law. And you study the law for, I don't know, 5, 7 years or so, and then you can take the exam and become a lawyer. But they don't make you take all these, what do they call these things? These prerequisites, not prerequisites, but kind of foundational courses, right? Everyone takes, well, I'm asking you, you're an apologist. Yeah, all these math requirements, you know. They assume that if they're accepting you to the university, they've already taken a look, you've already taken those classes. You already took them and passed them. We're accepting you because you've already done that work. And so we're not going to make you retake. I remember taking biology. I took biology my senior year, and I remember taking my freshman year in college. It's almost the same class. But there's no getting around it, though. I mean, unless you took AP biology, maybe there was some way to. But anyway, they don't do that there. Medicine's the same way. You jump right in. Your classes are all related. At least you're taking anatomy and chemistry and organic chemistry. You're right into the, you know, the groundwork for that degree, not the groundwork for some general broad degree where you have kind of a bunch of electives and all this. Not like that. Anyway, the Berlin that Marx goes to, things are actually being looked over pretty. Things are pretty tight there as far as public activity goes. The Kaiser at the time, Kaiser Friedrich, of course it's Friedrich Wilhelm. The third, Kaiser Friedrich Wilhelm III. There you go. I went to the cathedral in Berlin, and underneath the cathedral are all the caskets or the tombs of the Kaisers and their families that died over the years. And they only have like 4 names that they use for the guys, right? There's Friedrich, Wilhelm, occasionally there's a Ludwig thrown in, and maybe a Georg occasionally. And then they mix it up, like there's some Wilhelm Friedrichs, just some Wilhelms, just some Friedrichs, just some Ludwigs. And then they start mixing in these, you know, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the eighth, whatever. And so they were very uncreative with the names. It's hard to, history is kind of difficult for this era because who's Kaiser? Oh, wasn't he Kaiser 100 years before? No, that was his great grandfather. All right, same family. All right. But most of Prussia and Berlin in particular had become really a police state. They were really living almost under martial law. There was a lot of unrest there. Things were out of control as far as the Kaiser thought that there was a threat to their monarchy they had. So he puts things under tight control, and that included keeping an eye on people with the press. Keeping an eye on the press, on public meetings. You had to have, you know, documentation to meet together. And you have a public gathering, you know, outside that had to be all, you know, approved ahead of time. And they had people who were kind of like informants, you know, so especially at the university level, who would have sat in classes, and if a professor said something that was against the Kaiser or anything that he thought, or then you get tagged for that, and they come pay a nice visit to you. Yeah. Remember the time that Ted Nugent got visited by the Secret Service? Remember that? That wasn't that long ago, back when Obama was president. He made some comment at an NRA rally about, he didn't say it directly, but implied very strongly that maybe there would be some kind of NRA type solution for the problem of having a President Obama. Yeah. Well, the Secret Service came to visit him. And in fact, they visited him at that big hotel down in southern Oklahoma. What's that? You know, the big casino down there on the Texas border. He had a concert. You guys know who Ted Nugent is, by the way? I know you use that because you were raised right. That's why you know. What? Huh? He's one of the most amazing guitar players. Just a rock and roller, right? No special effects, no lighting show, not all this laser beams, explosions. Just rock and roll. But yeah, he made a comment like that, and next thing you know, you're getting like, are you Mr. Nugent? And he's a pretty tough, like outspoken guy, but after that little meeting though, he, at least on that topic, I have a feeling the Secret Service had to scare the bejesus out of you in your small little hotel room, 3 or 4 of them and you. That's what it would have been like. The whole idea, though, is to suppress dangerous thought, in Berlin in particular. So he comes into this world a bit, things are pretty restrained as far as people are fearful. Also, one more thing about Friedrich Wilhelm III. He's one of many Kaisers who they call the Iron Kaiser, but people seem to like that term, the Iron. And they use it with Margaret Thatcher back in the 80s. She was the Iron Lady, they called her. She was tough as nails. Kaiser Friedrich Wilhelm III had a son, and you want to know what his name was? Well, at the time, he was known as Prince Friedrich Wilhelm IV. Right, so you know where that's going. And Friedrich Wilhelm III was the fourth son. He was gay. He was a gay man, and he was an officer in the Prussian military. And he had a lover who was also an officer. And they decided that they really can't have a life together in any way. With his dad being Kaiser and him someday being Kaiser also. So they deserted the army. They left together and ran off. And Kaiser Friedrich Wilhelm III kept a pretty close eye on. He had some suspicions about his son. And of course, the army went after these two deserters and brought them back. They had a trial, kind of a nothing really trial, at a little palace in the eastern part of Berlin. And they didn't kill the future Kaiser, but they killed his lover, though. They chopped his head off right there. And man, that's an iron. I don't know. That's some horrible stuff. But Kaiser Friedrich Wilhelm IV, though, was eventually married and had children, like all good Kaisers are supposed to do. That's the big thing, right? Produce offspring. That's the only thing. So yeah, he was maybe he was the Iron Kaiser. He was not a friendly person at all. Okay. Also, at the University of Berlin, there was a professor who had died not too long before he got there, and it's a name you might know, and that name is, here we go, Hegel. Hegel, which there could be an entire class on just this one figure. Guess what GWF stands for? He's not royalty, though. Georg Wilhelm Friedrich. I'm sorry, it's not very creative, but this guy is the Kaisers. Professor, intellectual, a Renaissance man, really, wrote on topics so varied, such a broad spectrum of topics, everything from theology, everything from ethics to political science, and everything in between, that he was really a superstar at the university as a professor and writer, but he also had just passed away before Marx gets there. And so there's still kind of this, I must say, this kind of ghost of Hegel kind of looming over the university. People were all influenced by him in some way. And there were these two groups at the university, these student groups that met, and they were called the Hegelian Right. This has nothing to do with politics, really. It's just their interest. The Hegelian Right and Hegelian Left, also called also called the Young Hegelians. They already took his name and made it into a noun like this. Again, there's nothing like political. They weren't rivals or anything like that. They just had different interests because Hegel wrote on so much stuff that it depended on what interested you. The Hegelian Right had members of this club, I guess you call this group, who were interested in his writings about ethics and morality and theology. And then on the Hegelian Left, the Young Hegelians, they were interested more in studying his and talking and discussing his writings on social, economic, and political issues, about which he wrote quite a lot. I just read something, I didn't just read it, I read it many years ago, that there's been so much written about Hegel that it far exceeds, although as much as he wrote, it far exceeds the number of pages that he actually wrote himself. I guess it can be said about a lot of people, but anyway, so Hegel ends up being an influence because Marx falls into this group, the young Hegelians, Hegelian left, and of course these socioeconomic and political issues are important to him, or things that he's interested in as he's studying law there. Anyway, I'll just give you these names here real quick, these people who influenced Marx. I mentioned, well, Hegel already is one. Also another, same first name, Ludwig Feuerbach, which I'll talk about Monday, and also Friedrich Engels, who ends up kind of being helps finance him a little bit, but also co-writes the Communist Manifesto. Engels and Marx write that together. And that book you might have heard of before, but yeah. So this is philosophy. Let me say this. I've taught this before in regular class, and we're taking a test and all that. It used to be when I first started teaching this class a long time ago. I would inevitably get a call from a parent, at least one, maybe two sometimes, and the question was always kind of the same, like, "Why are you teaching my kids Marxism?" And that's very different. That's a look like, why are you still beating your wife? Or that's a really loaded question. Why are you teaching my kids Marxism? Well, I'm not teaching them Marxism. I'm teaching them about Marxism. How's that? Like, it's different. Like, I'm not cutting them in their throat. I'm not trying to convert them. I doubt that would be of any interest or benefit to any of them. But the reason I think it's important that we maybe just touch on a little bit even is because so much, not of your lifetime, but the generation before you, that being my generation, like this was a big part, and then my parents' generation, and then a little bit even my grandparents' generation, lived a good part of their life under this fear of the spread of communism. And when I think about all the things that have been influenced in the world by communism, usually not for the best, but okay, then and then all the threats that we lived under and all the beliefs and threats that we lived under over the years. And when I think about the spread of communism, I mean, there would have been a time that more than half the world, even in the 1980s, over half the world was living under some form of communism or Marxism. You would have, just with China alone, you got a big chunk right there, but China and the Soviet Union, which was just hugely expansive, and then you have other Eastern Bloc countries in Europe, and you have pieces of Central and South America that are living under this, and you have parts of Southeast Asia who are living under it, and you've got a really big chunk of the world that's living under some form of this government. And so to ignore it would be really irresponsible, because that's been a huge part of world history, at least of modern world history. So that's the little spiel I gave the parents have passed. Since time's gone by, I haven't got that call in a long time from anyone. But on Monday, I'll talk about the world that Marx saw and the world that we know today, and that your parents knew as growing up, and I knew as growing up. These are very different worlds that we're looking at here. He's looking at things he's looking at a different type of socioeconomic, very Dickensian type world, but the reality of the Dickensian world. And things have really shifted quite a bit. I don't say things are perfect, but things are certainly better than they were when Marx. So Marx is looking at a very different form of capitalism than capitalism that we know today. He's criticizing something that we would hardly recognize as capitalism. So, okay, so I'll talk about that on Monday. Is that it? Are we 4 minutes? Okay. Oh, I think this experiment's just going swimmingly. To use a Dickensian term. Yep. Oh man, I just got done using my ring. Hold on. I'm just gonna shut it off the rest of the day. Is it Friday?
It is, yes.
Hold on a minute. Let's see.
Oh, yeah. Good call.
Okay, what I gotta do?
To sign it. Yeah.
I gotta ask you questions on.
It's, I'm using my.
What's the function of the medulla oblongata?
Oh. No, not really, I'm just asking you, like, how you brain.
I wanna ask this question.
You're putting me on the spot, I don't remember.
Well, it controls cardiovascular. Oh, I'm working with a student here. Say, you know what the
No, you put me.
you know what the medulla oblongata is? Or do you kind of color onto a swimmer's
It's
house?
basically the brain stem, I'd say.
It's not. It controls cardiovascular, breathing, swallowing, all these
Involuntary functions.
involuntary.
You gotta get it on.
Now, put your brain on. Put your thinking cap on.
That's my tip.
I love this one. I love this one. What's the function of the hypothalamus?
Hypothalamus.
Oh, sorry. I'm thinking hippocampus. What's the hippocampus?
Hippocampus is short-term memory for long-term.
Yes. You know how I remember that? Is that if I saw a hippo on campus, that would really be something. I can't remember that, you know?
Can you sign the paper we leave in like 2 minutes?
I got questions.
I got my brain cap on.
Yeah, put your thinking cap on. That's gonna cut off your ability to think. What structure is responsible for hearing and smelling?
Hearing and smelling. Like you smell it.
What do I sign? Here? Okay, pencil? Anything else? Okay, I've got more questions for you then. What's the function of the pituitary gland?
Very good. Thinking?
Yeah, I know. It deals with your growth, the physical growth.
Is
Try one more. Well, I don't know if I can sign this or not, Robbie. The pons and the medulla oblongata partly compose what structure?
Partly impose what structure?
Yeah, together.
They are for motor control and sensory
But
analysis.
what structure do they compose together?
The cerebrum,
No,
or the cerebrum cortex.
the brainstem. What part of the brain is responsible for conscious thought and reasoning?
Cerebellum cortex.
I'm gonna reluctantly sign this. I'm turning off my cerebrum right
Thank you.
now. Yeah, not sure either of your brains are working or not. Take those sweat caps off. It's cutting off your circulation.
I can't put mine on.
It's huge. Where'd you guys? They need to get bigger. They need to have like small, medium, large.
We ordered kids some crap.
I think they got like the elementary school teacher.
She actually ordered kids some crap instead of the doll.
Yeah, that's tough.